All right, so uh, today we're diving into something a little different.
Different how?
Well, let's just say it involves afterlife, packing lists, anthropologists, and a whole lot of buzz.
Oh, you mean Rainwiller's love and his interesting burial requests? That's sparked some lively debate, that's for sure.
You said it. We've got 3 podcasts weighing in on this one, and their takes are all over the map.
It's like they listened to the same story but walked away with completely different impressions.
Okay, so give me the rundown. What are these podcasts saying?
Well, one podcast was completely enamored. They called Willer's Love's ideas a fascinating glimpse into the human need for continuity. Like, we're hardwired to believe some part of us lives on
And on the other side of the coin.
the other side. Yeah, one podcast called it straight up a baffling display of self-indulgence. They just didn't buy it.
Wow, talk about a difference of opinion. And what about the third podcast? Where did they land?
They played it pretty middle of the road, called it practical, like packing an umbrella just in case, if there happens to be an afterlife.
Okay, so we've got fascinating, baffling, and practical. This is going to be interesting.
And we haven't even gone to the best part yet.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. This isn't just about packing a physical suitcase. Remember, Willer's Lev is talking about a Darwinian shift in our understanding of consciousness.
Okay, well, hold on. A Darwinian shift. That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
What's he getting at with that?
He's basically saying that just like Darwin revolutionized our understanding of evolution, we're on the cusp of a similar revolution when it comes to consciousness.
So he thinks we're about to completely rewrite what we know about how the mind works.
Exactly. And the podcast definitely picked up on that. The one that was all about the baffling aspect, they were pretty skeptical.
What'd they say?
They said something like, to compare the supposed revolution in consciousness to Darwin's theory of evolution is a stretch, to say the least. They basically accused him of cherry-picking data.
So not convinced.
Not even a little. But then you have the podcast that was totally on board with Willer's Lev's ideas. They were like, this is groundbreaking potential. Imagine a world where our understanding of consciousness takes a quantum leap forward. They were all in.
Okay, so we've got skeptics and believers.
Yeah.
What about the more neutral podcast?
Yeah.
How do they handle this Darwinian shift idea?
They were more interested in the practical angle. They pointed out how Willer's Lev said something like, you don't know what might come along, and they connected that to his background as an anthropologist. Always prepared for the unexpected.
That's interesting. How the same statement can be interpreted in such wildly different ways.
Exactly. It all comes down to perspective.
So before we get too sidetracked by this whole Darwinian shift thing, let's back up a bit.
Yeah.
What exactly does Willer's Lev want to take with him to the afterlife anyway?
Well, the big one that's got everyone talking is his hunting gear.
Hunting gear. Seriously?
Yep. He wants to be buried with his rifle, his knives, the whole shebang.
Okay, I gotta admit, I'm a little surprised by that. It seems a bit out there, even for an anthropologist.
I know, right? But here's the thing. He's not doing it because he thinks he'll need to hunt wild boar in the afterlife.
Then what's the reason?
He sees it as a way of holding on to his identity, of taking a piece of himself with him into whatever comes next.
So it's more symbolic than practical.
Exactly. It's about continuity, a way of saying, this is who I am, and these things have helped shape me.
I can see that. And the podcasts. How they react to the whole hunting gear thing.
It's a mixed bag. One podcast called it a tangible expression of his belief in a continued existence. They saw it as this really powerful statement about his worldview.
And the others.
The more skeptical podcast wasn't having it. They said it was irresponsible and that these artifacts belong in a museum for everyone to learn from, not buried in the ground with one guy.
So basically they're saying he's being selfish.
Pretty much. But then you have the podcast that landed somewhere in the middle. They said it was a good reminder that our beliefs shape our reality even in death.
So 3 podcasts, 3 very different interpretations.
Exactly. It's like we're looking at the same object through 3 different lenses, each one highlighting something different.
It's fascinating how that works.
It really is.
So we've got these burial requests, the Darwinian shift claims, and now a whole debate about artifacts and museums. Where do we even go from here?
Well, to understand what Willer's Lev is really getting at, we need to dig a little deeper into this whole consciousness revolution he keeps talking about.
Okay, so let's unpack that. What exactly is he proposing?
He believes that advancements in neuroscience, particularly in our understanding of things like dementia and Alzheimer's, are giving us clues about the true nature of consciousness.
So he's saying that by studying what happens when consciousness fades, we might unlock the secrets to what it actually is.
Exactly. He's suggesting that maybe our brains aren't just generators of consciousness, but receivers capping into something much larger.
Like a cosmic internet of consciousness or something.
That's the general idea. And that's where things get really interesting.
A cosmic internet of consciousness. Okay, now my brain is officially doing backflips.
Right. It's a wild concept. And of course, the podcasts had a field day with it.
So break it down for me, how they each react.
Well, the one that was already skeptical of Willerslev, they were pretty dismissive. They said something like, while a poetic metaphor, the idea of a cosmic internet of consciousness lacks any real scientific basis.
So they're basically saying it's a nice thought, but not grounded in reality.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, the podcast that was more on board with Willerslev's thinking, they ran with it.
Really? How so?
They actually played a clip from the movie Interstellar. Remember that scene where Matthew McConaughey's character is talking about being connected across space and time?
Oh, yeah. I get chills just thinking about it.
Right. They use that to illustrate this idea of a larger interconnected consciousness that extends beyond our physical limitations.
Okay, I can see how that would resonate with people. And what about the podcast that was more in the middle? What was their take?
They were more focused on the implications of this idea, even if they weren't necessarily convinced it was true.
Interesting. What kind of implications?
Well, they pose this question. If we entertain this possibility of interconnected consciousness, even for a moment, what does that mean for how we live our lives?
That's a really good question. Does it change how we treat each other, how we interact with the world?
Exactly. It adds a whole new layer of complexity and responsibility to the whole being alive thing.
It's almost like realizing we're not just individuals, but part of something much bigger and more interconnected than we ever imagined.
Exactly. And that brings us back to Willerslev's burial requests and that whole debate about artifacts in museums.
Right, because if our consciousness is part of this larger web, does it even matter what we take with us when we die?
That's a question that really got the podcasts thinking.
So how'd they respond?
Well, the podcast that was more critical of Willerslev, they doubled down on their stance that his belongings belong in a museum.
Because they have historical and educational value for the wider public.
Exactly. They argued that burying them would be a loss for everyone.
Okay, I can see their point.
Yeah.
What about the other podcasts?
The podcast that was more sympathetic to Willerslev beliefs, they saw it as a powerful expression of personal belief. They said it's his way of honoring his life, his passions, and carrying a part of himself into whatever comes next.
So it's about more than just the physical objects themselves.
Exactly. It's about what they represent, about the meaning and significance they hold for the individual.
And then the Middle Ground podcast.
They landed somewhere in between. They acknowledged the historical and cultural value of the artifacts, but also recognized the power of personal belief and the importance of individual choice.
So a more nuanced perspective.
Exactly. They emphasize the importance of respecting different viewpoints, even if we don't necessarily agree with them.
It's like there's no easy answer, no right or wrong way to approach this.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the complexity of the issue and the validity of different perspectives.
Which is a good reminder for any conversation, really. Not just ones about the afterlife and cosmic internet of consciousness.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here? We've explored these different reactions to Willerslev's ideas. We've delved into the concept of a cosmic internet of consciousness, and we've grappled with the ethical dilemmas surrounding burial requests. What's the takeaway?
I think the biggest takeaway is the importance of keeping an open mind.
Open to new possibilities, to different ways of seeing the world.
Exactly. Because even if we don't agree with everything Willerslev is saying, he's forcing us to confront some really big questions.
Questions about life, death, consciousness, and what it means to be human.
And those are questions worth asking, even if we don't have all the answers.
It's like he's cracked open this door, to this whole different way of thinking about life and death, and he's just left it wide open for us to walk through.
It's true. It's kind of refreshing, actually, to be given permission to question, to explore, to consider these big what-ifs that we don't always make space for.
Yeah, it's not about right or wrong, believing or not believing. It's about making space for the conversation, pushing the boundaries of what we think we know about the world and ourselves.
Exactly. And you know what it reminds me of? That Carl Sagan quote, the one about somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known.
Ooh, I like that. And maybe Willerslev is onto something huge with this whole cosmic internet of consciousness things.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's something else entirely, something we haven't even begun to imagine.
Right. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the not knowing is part of what makes it so fascinating.
Totally. It's about embracing the mystery,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of funny when you think about it, because that's basically the title of his book, Afterlife, a conversation about the uncertain.
Uh-huh. Very true. He's not claiming to have all the answers. He's just inviting us to join the conversation.
Exactly. And it's a conversation worth having. I mean, whether we're talking about ancient burial rituals or cutting-edge neuroscience, or even just the contents of one anthropologist's afterlife wardrobe, it all comes back to these fundamental questions about who we are, where we came from, and what happens next.
It really does. And you know what's really striking to me? It's not just about what happens after we die, but how these ideas, even if they're hypothetical, how they might change how we live right now.
That's a really good point. It's like, if our consciousness is part of something bigger, something that transcends our individual lives, it kind of changes the game, doesn't it?
It does. It makes you think about the impact of your actions, your intentions, the legacy you leave behind. And not just in a material sense, but in a consciousness sense.
Yeah, it's like this ripple effect. If we're all part of this interconnected web, then what we do, how we treat each other, it all matters on a much larger scale.
Exactly. So the question isn't just what happens after we die, but how do we want to live our lives knowing that our consciousness in some form might continue on, might be part of something much bigger than ourselves?
Now, that is a question worth pondering. So on that note, I think we've done our due diligence on Rain Willers-Lev and his unique perspective on the afterlife.
It's been quite a ride, I have to admit, from packing lists to cosmic internet and everything in between.
It really has. But hey, that's the beauty of these deep dives, isn't it? We get to explore these big, fascinating, sometimes baffling questions and hopefully walk away with a little more wonder, a little more curiosity about the world around us.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
So to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this journey into the great unknown. Keep those minds open and those curiosity gears turning, because who knows what we'll uncover next time. Till then, take care and happy exploring.